Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freightonomics. I am Anthony Smith, lead economist here at FreightWaves, and I'm here alongside Zach Strickland. He's back, consultant of Sonar and director of Freight Market Intelligence, is knower of all things random and factual. So, this is Freightonomics, where we combine freight and economics, more importantly, economics, but we have a freight aspect as well. We're excited that you can join us. We took a slight break last week, but we are back and we're happy that you can join us if you're watching right now. And it just so happens to be Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are also streaming. So if you're on LinkedIn, be sure to give us a comment or a shout out and we'll be sure to get to you. But with that, Zach, welcome back from your vacation.
Yes, vacation. The welcoming back that I get is that it's pouring down rain here in Chattanooga. Away from the sunny beaches of northern Florida there on Highway 30A. But yeah, I'm back and ready to talk some freight today. And we got a pretty good show, Anthony. We got, I had like a day to get back in mode and get back with the freight scene and whatnot, because I didn't see a lot of trucks in the Panhandle. A fun fact for those that don't know the industry as well is that the northern Panhandle of Florida is a freight desert. Not a lot of action, not a lot of origins, a very vacation-y heavy spot. So I didn't see a lot of tractors and trailers, which is going to be a big topic of today's show. We've got Alan Adler.
That's right.
Here to talk about the Class 8 order situation, semiconductors, all sorts of fun stuff, and really try to figure out and discern how long will the market stay this way? Because last time, 2018 hit us, it was, everybody went out and bought a truck. Capacity eased really quickly. That's not the case this year. Supply chain, now transportation even contributing to these problems. So we're going to talk that through
That's right.
a little bit later with Alan.
We got Adler, we got news, we got memes. Is that a thing?
Memes, for those of you that don't know or haven't watched our new formatted show, our hour-long format, if it will. We're filling time, if you will. For those that watch the show can visually see some of the memes that we put up here. So, and that's how we lead off the show. We kind of get things started with some fun, getting people in the mood to talk freight and economics at the same time. So let's get it kicked off with some meme-onomics. So, Anthony, I know you weren't a freight broker.
No, that I know of.
I knew you weren't a freight broker. I dabbled in the space briefly in the early part of my career. And this meme right here is, I feel like, pretty relatable in itself. About the perception of freight brokerage in the United States. Now, this is probably one of the toughest years in history to be a freight broker. Every day, you've got to come in and basically encounter frustration.
Yeah.
Because back, just a few short years ago, freight brokers basically just said, I'm going to go and find some shippers. And then all I got to do is just go pick a handful of carriers and go, they'll come to me.
Yeah.
They'll come to me. They're happy to get the freight. But now it is just turned into utter chaos. Carriers have their pick of the litter and shippers. If you're able to show up anywhere.
Yeah.
So the freight broker's job being in the middle of this situation with no assets in control. And obviously the shippers are essentially like begging for them to find freight and wanting it there in a timely manner. What my friends think I do, sitting at this glorious little 18-screen setup to where I can look at 15 different things at once. Mm-hmm. That's accurate in a lot of places, but not necessarily, it's not glorious.
It's not typical.
No, it's not typical. What my mom thinks I do,
closing deals.
Yeah, just settling stuff up. I'm a very respectable young man or woman. And then what society thinks I do, it's a big frat house.
That's partially what I think.
It's maybe on Fridays-ish, but I would doubt in the last several months that's that accurate. Mm-hmm. What I think I do, probably not at this point anymore, being the Wolf of Wall Street, but you can make some decent money as a freight broker if you're very active and not willing to sleep. Whereas I think you would come in handy there.
Yes.
If you don't need sleep, you definitely
it's a waste of time.
Jump in that freight brokerage game. And what I actually do, sitting there in a cube, more than likely, yelling at a computer screen, trying to get coverage for my freight and making sure it is where it needs to be in a timely manner.
So, Zach, I see that there's 5 images here. Now, could you maybe just paint a picture, if there was a 6th one, of what drivers think I do?
Drivers think that you combine probably the fraternity house one and the Wolf of Wall Street one, together.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they essentially think that they do, more than likely. I would assume, and of course, a little bit of that yelling, because you definitely get active. You have to have high energy as a freight broker. You cannot come into the day willing to just kind of take it easy and sit back.
Starting early too. Starting early in the day.
Yeah, it won't let you. Talk to Kevin Hill about that.
No. Speaking of drivers, you got another one here.
Yeah. So this one has got to be the most, I guess, topical one that I have for the show today. Driver shortage plus this 60,000 new jobs hitting the market. You're gonna have a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the driver shortage, and of course the South Park. I love the "you're gonna have a bad time" memes. But the driver shortage, has never had to compete with such an amazing amount of competition in the workspace.
Yeah.
The hourly jobs that are out there right now, the construction jobs, all these white collar jobs coming online all at once. And nobody wants to take them right now, Anthony.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going to be, there's an uphill battle. There's going to be some friction there with no one wants to take these jobs at what they're paying, and the substitute of labor. I mean, if I can make something of a similar wage, doing something that's a little bit maybe easier, maybe I don't have to be away from my family, maybe it's not as stressful or strenuous on my body or taxing on my mind, I think the choice has been made for me.
Yeah, and then of course we have the stimulus package that still has some tail on it.
Yeah.
Why do I need to work if I don't have to work?
Exactly. So there's a lot of things. You know what I did?
What you did?
I did Economy Lately episode on this. Yeah. Don't want to plug my own. I want to plug my own show. I mean, but we did an Economy Lately on this, on what's going on with jobs, where aren't people going back to work and things like that. And that's exactly one of the biggest points, is that there is that stimulus that's still in place.
I mean, and everybody kind of thought this is the problem with the government printing money.
Yeah.
If you just hand out a bunch of money, I don't think it necessarily was the wrong thing to do in the short term by any means. But we'll see how this plays out in the long run. For sure. I think there's going to be some wonky stuff. And again, I'm going to tune into your Economy Lately, which the one thing you do that I do approve of is the Economy Lately. So if you haven't seen,
even when I take shots at you, I mean, you gotta love it. But the other thing is, I mean, when we're looking at the print off of money, there has to be some kind of impact from it, seeing how 35 to 40% of all U.S. dollars in circulations were printed in the last 12 months. That seems substantial.
If we could just open up government and print money all the time and don't work, we would have already done that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would have signed up for that one.
That's not how, just common sense tells you that's probably, because obviously that's just what we would do.
Yeah, not sustainable. Sustainable.
No, you got to have somebody doing something, adding value to the system. You can't just sit there and take money for nothing. I guess some can for a short period of time, but in a society to work well, that's not a great situation. All right, the final meme that I have for us today. This one's relevant in terms of if you have, been under a rock for the last several years, and having somebody question your increasing freight costs, which has got to happen.
Yeah.
All the time at this point. I know the brokers out there have heard this type of statement over and over. $3,000. That lane cost me $2,150 5 years ago. Why did it go up? If you're asking this question, just go back to bed.
Mm-hmm.
Get some good sleep. You're going to need it. Things have changed in a 5-year period. I know that's unusual for some people to figure out, but it's, freight costs. I mean, that's actually lower than I would have expected.
I mean, and you also have to kind of think of larger carriers larger shippers that maybe work with contracts entering the spot market for the first time in a while, and just blindsided as what's happened. What year is it? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, and I love that meme, the face of that guy, kind of the clueless guy. What's the name of that meme, by the way?
I don't know. Let's get a follow-up on it, and let's actually invite him on the show.
Has he become an NFT yet?
He needs to be an NFT.
Token? Yeah.
Is that still a thing, or is that last week?
Dude, that's probably. I went on vacation. You got to tell me.
Okay. I think it might still be a thing, but the bubble might be shrinking. Who knows? But there has to be some applicability to it, right? There has to be some use for NFTs, I'm sure.
I don't
for
think
artists
so.
and creators.
I don't know. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the new economy. You need to get on top of it.
You got to get on top of it. Speaking on getting on top of it, all of the latest within the economy, I think we have another segment around the news.
Yes, Newsonomics. So we're going to get you guys kicked off for the week. The most relevant topics for what we think are happening right now in the news.
That's exactly it. So starting off with the first one, we have a story that was written on our very own FreightWaves.com. If you don't check it out for our articles, we're putting out a lot of good stuff. And I know I might be a little bit biased talking about our FreightWaves, and I work here, but we put out a lot of good stuff. Our editorial team is always on it around the clock, breaking news. But the first story that we have here is around Daimler Trucks is short of workers across the board, and this is coming from the CEO.
I mean, I know this may not be a shock at this point, but we're going to have the guy that wrote this article on the show here in a little bit, Alan Adler, to talk about some of this in a little bit more detail. But imagine that they're short of workers, and this again, we're talking about a capacity situation that's not like this is a self-fulfilling mechanism. Like, we're not able to get capacity, we're not able to fix the capacity situation. And there's more demand flowing through the system because they need to build trucks. Now they don't have the employees or the workers to build the trucks, so they can't fix the system.
Yeah.
And it's just, and Daimler, of course, in terms of market share, the largest in the nation for domestic truckload carrier providers. They are, of course, they supply more of what we consider fleet trucks. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff the larger carriers typically purchase. And there's, in a normal year, 6 to 9 month lead time, they can't even produce trucks. We're gonna talk about this a little bit more detail later about what they're doing to get around it, how is it going to impact the market, et cetera. Again, check out the article though. Short of workers for Daimler, extremely relevant topic, especially as we move into the third and fourth quarter when we don't have any trucks.
Exactly.
Coming online.
So Zach, jumping into that one, I mean, I always do this. I jump into a topic and I get into a rabbit hole. So you might have to pull me back out of this one. But when looking at what's going on in the economy and this whole self-fulfilling prophecy of like people not going back to work, but there's still this adequate demand, and the demand is outpacing so much that's going on within the supplies, and we're needing these supplies to be transferred throughout the market. So it's like this big cycle. But one of the things that we're talking about throughout the early parts of the pandemic was this state-by-state reopening process, that it's not going to be the same across the board. And those states and those businesses that potentially open up sooner are going to have a little bit of an advantage over those that are kind of waiting around to see what happens and not quite take action. I can only imagine that this might be the exact same or somewhat similar situation for those employees that are maybe slowing down or not quite returning to the workforce just yet, not because of COVID scares or anything like that, but maybe they're getting so good on those unemployment benefits. Maybe I have enough savings from this last year of unemployment benefits, those stimulus packages, to say, hey, I can kind of take my time returning back to the workforce. That might be great, but I can only imagine that those that return back to the workforce early on are going to have a much more, or be in a better position by the end of the year. And there's going to be a lot of people looking for work all at once. I can only imagine if there's a complete shut-off.
It's going to happen that way. That's exactly what's being set up. We said it way back over a year ago when the pandemic was hitting. Like, if you're, taking that stimulus and thinking like, I'm going to take some time off, et cetera, like, great, good for you. But, and I almost want to put that meme over the top of you when you were saying this. The guy he looks like the guy from Reading Rainbow. I can't, LeVar Burton.
Yes.
Like I always thought it was him at first, but I was like, no, he's old now. But that's like that more, like, you're thinking for the now, you're feeling good about it, but the people that are getting jobs now and willing to work now, they're definitely going to be in a better position.
And a lot of them are going to be getting some incentives. I mean, you're seeing like all these companies hiring right now that are really kind of positioning, hey, come on board. We have the signing bonus. We're giving away iPhones. Maybe if they can get an iPhone, who knows? An Xbox One, whatever. They're having these incentives. They even have these pathways built out to, hey, this is how you become a manager within our establishment. So
like getting in early. But you know what? Our audience is too smart for this. We don't need to tell them that.
You don't need to tell them.
You don't need to tell them that. This is common sense to them. they've all figured it out a long time ago because they were watching our show back when the pandemic hit, and we were talking about this a little bit.
Exactly right.
So next story of the day. Now this one I think is a huge deal. The Prime Day announced for later in June, June 21st, June 22nd for Amazon Prime, and last year we had it in October.
Yeah.
Huge impact to retail. It totally disrupts the retail cycles, transportation. Anthony, I got to ask you at this point, like what economic reason makes this make sense? Because I have all sorts of like problem with this.
Yeah.
Number one, it's like last minute, like, oh wait, here comes Prime Day for all you transportation providers where capacity, we're already sitting at 24-25% capacity. Like June is already tight. And now they're getting no notice. You're talking about Prime Day, 1 to 2 day deliveries. Do they have inventory yet? I mean, what do you think's happening here?
So off the top of my head, I think there's a few things here. So one, what Amazon does, others follow suit. And when you're a large player, you can put pressure on other people. So thinking about minimum wage, like when large corporations want to push the minimum wage into place, like say, we're going to make minimum wage $15 an hour, something like that. They can do that. They can take that hit. They know smaller or medium-sized companies can't take that hit. And it's great because they can get more money into their workers, but they're also going to be able to put their competition in a worse off position. So imagine they're going to move Prime Day early up. They might be able to handle it. They have the infrastructure for them. They might be a little bit delayed, but they're also going to put pressure on their competitors because they follow suit of whatever Amazon does. And so I could be looking into another rabbit hole here, but say I'm Amazon, I do this, you guys got to follow suit, try to keep up. I'm going to outpace you every step of the way, and you're going to be in a bad position. By the end of the year, I'm going to be better positioned because you're still trying to play catch up to where I was earlier on in the summer. So I think that could be a potential play. Try to keep up to the biggest player in the game.
I think you're right. This is fascinating, the thing to talk about for me. Like I was thinking about purely transportation centric, inventory management, warehouse logistics, and this makes total sense when you say it that way. That you're talking about, basically putting other people on it, like they're out of position now.
Yeah,
it's classic, art of war.
Yeah, like it's at a poker table. You're just like bullying them, like, all right, bet, and you're just raising it up and just watching them squirm, and they don't have it.
Yeah, especially but again, I have to think like I deal with Amazon all the time, as most people do. We're still not fully back to where we were with our order situations, our order cycles. I mean, maybe people have gotten used to not getting it in a day for some of the Prime orders, et cetera. But I know that the parcel, you're talking about
overloaded. The
parcel system's already at max capacity.
Yeah.
And the logistics of this situation feel like, it's just going to be insult to injury for a lot of the carriers out there and transportation providers. And I know Amazon is now a transportation provider on their own accord. So maybe they've got that kind of set up to where they're like, I don't know. It's fascinating to me to see what happens with this, especially since June is not really we're not talking about a soft time of the year in June.
Yeah.
Like July is actually a softer period.
Christmas in July.
Yeah, Christmas in July. Like that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in terms of infrastructure, when they traditionally have it is in the middle of July. We've already kind of had that huge vacation period around the 4th of July. People have taken their time off. But June is kind of that ramp up before everybody takes a vacation. And the transportation system is already like strained.
Yeah, and another point of, I think we were chatting earlier last week, pull forwards of different seasons. So maybe they're also anticipating pulling forward other parts of the retail or seasonality or seasonal trends. And so maybe this is a part of their pull forward. And maybe they'll also, because they're Amazon, they can interject small little pop-up, hey, big weekend deal in July. And so I think a mix of pull forward of these seasonal trends, in addition to let's put some pressure on the competition here. Let's watch them squirm.
Yeah, so tender rejection rates tend to average, much higher in June than they are in July by the end of it. But the thing is that they're typically trending down in July. And again, the last 3 years, when we've looked at this, every single year has been completely different.
Yeah.
Last year, we were at about or 2019, I should say, we were about 5-6%, in June, and it ramped up to 7%. The year before that, dramatically different. We were roughly 23%, 23 to 24%. This year, we're at 24% yet again. Far different trend line for that purpose, but July, much softer. And October, when they had it last year, tends to be a softer period of the year, but it wasn't. Because COVID and all that nonsense. So, fascinating stuff. So, we've had some macroeconomic stuff come out.
That's right. I mean, it's Thursday.
Yeah.
And so that means one thing for me, initial jobless claims. And I've been so skeptical throughout the past, but it's easing. I mean, there's still some skepticism around some of the overall unemployment numbers, but when we're looking at the latest number, what we have from the initial jobless claims, we see another pandemic low. And that's what we have here in this Sonar chart is initial jobless claims on a weekly basis. It comes out every Thursday. Last week was at 406,000 applicants. This week we see that there were 385 applicants for initial jobless claims. So we're in that 300,000 range. That's something significant. Historically, 300,000 and upper 300,000s were indicative of a higher reading, but it's not unheard of. Like we're pre-pandemic, we're in the 200,000 mark. So we are definitely nearing those normalized initial jobless claims numbers.
That's fascinating. I mean, especially considering the, what we were talking about earlier with the white collar jobs.
Yeah.
People can't hire anything. We're starting to see this ramp down. Do you think that we'll be through this by the third quarter?
I think so. I think if we continue to stay on this trajectory, I mean, we might find a base of, settling around those 300,000 to upper 200,000. There might be a base there of those that are still kind of collecting unemployment advantageously, or maybe not. I don't know your situation. I'm not saying that you're taking advantage or doing any kind of fraudulent attempts. I'm just saying we might see a settling there until we see a full-on retraction from either state levels or a federal level of, benefits are actually officially cut off on those bonus benefits. And so I think we will continue to see that downward movement. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with unemployment rates on tomorrow's release. But there's so many different measures. There's that. There's the
job creation too. Have we not created jobs with all the volatility? Like, so in a normal year, if we were just going back to the way things were status quo, it would be one thing. But I believe we've actually had some job creation throughout this whole situation because of all the adaptation that companies have had to have.
That's right. I mean, we have the ADP May report that shows that 978,000 jobs were created in the most recent month. So that's nearly 1 million jobs that were created for non-farm. We call them non-farm. That's the way it's broken out, jobs. And so there's a lot more.
Well, not just 100-something years ago, we were still an agrarian society.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Over 100 years ago now, but I guess it was, not that long ago, relatively.
Not that long ago, but the classification still stands and holds to this day. And what we're seeing is that there were nearly 1 million jobs created in the most recent month. And so that's something substantial. I think it outpaced a lot of people's expectations. In addition to this, when we're looking at the upstream, I always have to look at it upstream versus downstream. Upstream at the manufacturing level, manufacturers are talking about the difficulties in getting labor in-house. And I think this also is going to lead into later on what we talk to Alan Adler about with some employment shortages and what's going on with the whole chip shortages and automotive and all that. But looking at manufacturing right now, like the ISM PMI, I love that index that comes out every single month, shows an increase in manufacturing. So the industry in the segment is expanding. It dipped down slightly for prices, ever so slightly, still highly elevated, still I think well into the 80s for prices, but that's not going to be an area of that shows that there's just continued expansion in prices, just expansion at a slower rate. And so it's all going to come downhill, and that's going to lead into some of the things that we're talking about in the last episode of inflationary pressures.
Yeah, I mean, the manufacturing sector is cranking right now, and they're coming online, and we're going to talk to Alan here in a minute. But first up, we've got Whatonomics.
That's it.
So this is where we take a few minutes just to describe a data point or a piece of information for those of you that may or may not have had any exposure to it. I know that I could have used this help back in the day, trying to get a little bit of this information. If you're not thinking about it, maybe you should, or maybe you shouldn't. It's your decision. It's your life. You live how you want to live, as the famous John Bowes once said. So this week, and again, this is going to bleed right into our guest, Class 8 orders. So first of all, what is a Class 8 order? Anthony Smith, do you know what a Class 8 order is?
What is a Class 8 order? I mean, I think it has something to do with the order of trucks and those equipments that holds those equipments throughout the country.
Well, let's pull up a chart of these Class 8 orders.
We have a chart for that?
We have a chart of
Is it
these
in
Class
Sonar?
8 orders. It is in Sonar. Of course, those of you that have Sonar already probably know this, but if you don't, Class 8 orders, of course, considered somewhat of a leading indicator about how capacity is going to be added to the market. Now, if you look back, so this is basically the equipment that you see hauling those 53-foot trailers. This is not your F-150s or F-250, F-350. That's the only other trucks I know. But any of your light trucks, and some of your smaller equipment does not haul freight. These are the truck orders that haul the big freight, the truckloads out there. Some of the LTL, obviously, runs mainly on diesel, although we're getting some electric involvement here. We're going to ask Alan about that. So when these orders start to increase, they tend to follow when carriers have money. If you look at 2017, 2018, carriers got a huge amount of cash.
Yeah.
So they're trying to reinvest in their equipment. Some of them will not replace their trucks. If we have a down cycle, which 2016 was a down cycle year for trucking. And so carriers kind of held off. They said, all right, we're going to let our fleet age a little bit, maybe a year, until we get some of that cash. Because also they don't need those trucks, but it's very difficult. You can't just buy a truck and say, you know what, I don't need this truck anymore.
Yeah.
and that's where you start looking at some of the huge truck price market and whatever. But right now you can't buy a used truck anywhere. They're out. They're gone. So Class 8 orders are something that you look at when you're trying to gauge, okay, how good do carriers feel about their situation? How much money do they have? Also, what's about to happen? Because a Class 8 order runs about a 6 to 9 month cycle in terms of fulfillment. Now, not this year, but in normal years, you have a 6 to 9 month fulfillment cycle. They put these orders in traditionally at the end of the year when they're hitting their budgets. They're basically saying, all right, we've got enough budget to have, they start evaluating their equipment needs, et cetera. Put in these orders now, depreciate them over time, or take that immediate depreciation if that was another rule that occurred over the last few years that actually caused that spike or helped increase that spike in 2018 with a lot of that equipment orders. So all those trucks came online. And we saw that impact in 2019, where we saw capacity basically oversupply the market, increasing trucking failures. So the Class 8 orders are a fantastic data point to look at when you were talking about trying to figure out how much capacity is going to be added. And right now, the big question is, when are those truck orders going to come online? And have carriers kind of learned their lesson from the past of oversaturating the market with equipment?
So, Zach, I got a question for you. So Class 8 orders is one thing. When those orders actually get fulfilled and put into place is a whole nother thing.
Right.
We know that the economy, not just the freight economy, but the macro economy, but they move in cycles. So historically, when we've seen these massive spikes in orders come into place after, these carriers get more money, or maybe there's just been a ramp up in activity and they need it. By the time these orders come to fruition and they get produced, do we usually see, or do we ever see, a mismatch? And okay, now we're just oversupplied with too many trucks and we don't need them anymore. We could have used them, 8 months ago.
That's the problem. That's the art of ordering a Class 8 truck, is that when you have money to buy them, you go out and you buy it. But then by the time the truck gets there, you may not need it.
Right.
So it is a long decision process for a carrier to say how many trucks they need, et cetera. And some of them are replacement orders for existing equipment that they're going to push to the used market, so they don't have to incur maintenance charges, et cetera. So it is a fantastic game to play if you're a financial analyst at a carrier to try to figure out what's the optimal replenishment cycle, how much capacity do we need to grow, how much are we going to need, how much of this freight is going to be present
Right.
when we get these orders, fully seated and whatnot. And of course, seating the equipment is a totally different story altogether, and that is also going to be another little headwind, which the Class 8 orders may give us a little bit of insight into as well.
Excellent. So speaking of Class 8 orders, we have someone very important coming up here, and I don't know, I heard in the grapevine, like, he's rearing and ready to go. We have our very own Alan Adler who's been covering this market or this segment of the market pretty closely.
Yeah, let's bring him on and see what he's got to say about all this. He, of course, covers this stuff extensively on FreightWaves.com, and we just talked about your article earlier, Alan. First of all, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. New show for me. This is a first. And Anthony and Zach, good to see you guys. Hope we can solve world peace on this one. I don't know. What do you think?
We'll give it our best shot.
Make it worse.
All right. Good.
So let's kick things off with, kind of your article. You were talking about, the employment situation for these OEMs. Do you tell us a little bit about what you learned when you were doing this article?
Well, I think you're referring to the John O'Leary piece that posted yesterday and is getting a little bit of traction today. It kind of went up late in the day. It was our first opportunity really to talk to the new head of Daimler Trucks. That's a good place to get information because they are sort of the big dog in the porch as far as that goes. I mean, PACCAR's not too far behind them, but they're not catching them anytime soon. And so, O'Leary gave us kind of some time yesterday. We went into some of these issues. And, what I chose for a lead is simply that they're short of everything. They're short of workers in the plants. They're short of parts depot workers. They're short of technicians. I mean, everything on the employment side is stretched. And he knows that's not just the truck business. That's, the industries across. So I think catching up is something that, they hope to do. But right now, I use the term, it's a bit of a cliche, but I use whack-a-mole because they've got deal with those things, and they've got price inflation on commodities, which I'm sure you guys have talked about quite a bit. They've got supply chain difficulties. It's interesting. I was just on a webinar before I came on with you guys from FTR Transportation Intelligence, and Don Ake over there says this is as bad as it's been since World War II. In terms of all these things kind of happening at once, and so the navigation routes are not easy. And you just mentioned, Zach, the idea of seating trucks. I mean, that's huge. There's 600,000 fewer drivers simply because of the National Drug Clearinghouse, right, that have been taken off the road. And there's not a great glut of people wanting to become truck drivers, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, the employment situation is like, it's crazy to me that, I talked to my wife who's in physical therapy. They have the exact same problem. It has nothing to do with freight or trucking or transportation or durable goods at all. It's a service industry. They can't get people to come on board there either. So it's widespread throughout the economy itself. So what do you think, are they seeing some delays, in terms of order fulfillment at these OEMs? Do you think that it's going to be a significant delay or have an impact down the road?
Well, I think the answer is yes to that. I don't know that they're going to unpack that for you in terms of where and who's getting delayed. One of the comments yesterday that John O'Leary made was that, if you really need a vehicle right now, let's say you're an ambulance company, was the example he gave, and you really need that ambulance, then Daimler's going to get that to you. That's probably more of a Class 6 or maybe even a Class 7 vehicle. But they're going to get that to you if you are ordering either for for replacement demand or maybe for capacity additions because, business is good and it looks like it's going to stay good. If you're trying to do that, maybe you can wait a little longer. So I think that what we've got right now, and the May orders are just out today, last night and today. And what you're looking at is a pretty good sized drop off in terms of orders in May. But that is really misleading because the demand is still there, but there's nowhere to build them. You mentioned 6 to 9 months in normal time, Zach, in terms of fulfillment of orders. We're at 11 months plus right now. There's no build slots left. There's no real assurance of getting a truck if you order it today. So I think one of the new things that fleets are having to exercise is patience. And they've got to say, well, we don't know what's going to happen with 2022 order books because these guys, the manufacturers won't open them until they have some clarity around pricing, commodity pricing, and things like that. I mean, trucks that were ordered, and delivered in the first quarter, the manufacturers pretty much ate those price increases. They didn't really pass them on too much to the purchasers. But the trucks that are sort of in process now, and the aluminum, and the steel, and the wood, and the rubber is all more expensive. There's probably going to have to be some negotiations before those trucks are delivered, and they may well be more expensive. And some of that cost may be borne by the fleet.
So, Alan, one of the things you're talking about is, of course, some of these raw materials and goods that go into this production. But can you also talk about the big one, semiconductor shortages, which is also, I think, probably
Yeah,
impacting
yeah.
some of it?
It is, and we've seen a lot of interesting approaches to how to handle that. I mean, first of all, there is an overall shortage, Anthony, as you know. But a company like Daimler, John O'Leary said yesterday, he said, look, he said, we're a global company. We can go out there and sort of source where we need to. Daimler was an interesting case in that they took rolling downtime at two plants in North Carolina earlier this year. I think that's all been pretty much restored now. But they focused the semiconductors on the more profitable Class 8 trucks and kind of let the medium duties, go for a little bit. I think what's happening now is that they're starting to get a little more visibility on where are those chips that we need. I love the story that Packard told us. Kevin Bainey told me we were out in Phoenix for a medium duty ride and drive, and he told me, he said we didn't really lose 3,000 units in the first quarter. We just parked them, and that's what they did. So they had unfinished trucks, and they put them in the yard. And they waited till they got the chips. They put the chips in, and then all of a sudden in March, you saw the production numbers go up from February, and everybody thought, oh, well, we may be out of the woods. Because it went right back down in April and now in May. But we don't really know about production yet. But we know that the orders are beginning to look a little more realistic. But it's either going to be probably 2022 or 2023 when you see an actual peak in this cycle, and then it'll start to trend back down again. But the demand, underlying demand, is very much still there.
Yeah. So, in 2018, we saw this kind of humpbacked, this double humped cycle for the Class 8 orders. Do you think we're going to see something similar this year, or do you think carriers have kind of like slowed down because they know they're not going to get the equipment very quickly?
There's a lot of similarities, Zach, in terms of what's happening this year and what happened in 2018, but there are also some differences. One of the things that you had in 2018, you mentioned a lot of the cash that these guys, the fleets had to buy equipment, and that's true. And of course, with the spot rates where they are now, they've got cash rolling in, and what do I do with it? In 2018, you remember you're coming off of the tax cut, so they had kind of a windfall, and you could either invest that or pay tax on it. So buy equipment. This time, though, it seems to be more on a needs basis, capacity expansion, and things like that. There's also a couple other things you mentioned, used trucks. I want to talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that's happened is you've got a lot of safety equipment that is impacting total cost of ownership, especially on safety, and the safety basically will go better on the verdicts if you get into a crash. You got a lot of traffic and safety crash avoidance equipment now that is standard and is coming standard on the newer trucks, say from 2018 forward. So there's a real desire to get into these newer trucks and ideally, impact that insurance bill, and also, with a lot more visibility both inside and outside the vehicle. So I think that's another factor that's driving a lot of the replacement demand, is to get into these sort of safety or safer trucks, if you will.
So, Alan, you're talking about existing trucks. Can you kind of get into some of that, not just like these new trucks, but existing trucks that were already on the road, or maybe the market's tightening for those?
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned, I think Anthony or Zach, one of you guys said that, it's really hard to get a good used truck. You can get some older stuff. I watched that used equipment market as well. And, right now prices are very, very high on anything from sort of 2017 forward. There, it bounces around a little bit, but auction numbers, are higher. Retail numbers, stores are higher. I talked to one guy who's at a leasing company for story last month on used trucks, and he said, 25% price increase is not even the highest that you're seeing. So it flows straight down. When you can't get the new truck, you try to get the used truck, and a lot of these fleets are doing one of two things: either trying to buy up that off lease 4-year-old vehicle, to put into service, or and this was a real issue last year around this time, was holding on to trucks because there was no real value in the used market. Now there's plenty of value if you want to offload your stuff. But a lot of these guys say, wait a minute, maybe we can go 500,000 miles in this truck instead of 400,000, or 5 years instead of 4 years. So I think, everybody's making these decisions based on, what can I turn into cash today? And if you have to go out and buy trucks, like you said, Zach, that's a tough thing to do, and you're going to pay more for them, right? So maybe you hold on a little longer.
Yeah, I know a guy in the used truck space. He was telling me that there was simply nothing, nothing available the other day. So I mean, that's not shocking at all, especially from what you're telling me. So, has there been any now that they're just struggling to keep up with demand, has there been any further interest in growing the electric vehicle space? Has that become a thing that they're kind of putting the brakes on for a minute, or is the demand growing and they're still continuing to invest that and move that down the road for the Class 8s?
Yeah, it's actually growing faster, and it isn't really because of capacity needs for today. But I think everybody in the business in trucking sees that, either it's government pressure or some other kind of pressure to decarbonize the fleet, to run cleaner, and so the interest in at least trying these electric trucks, the Class 8 trucks, is really high. I think I just saw this morning that Volvo made a sale off of the trucks they're going to build in Virginia, the electric trucks there. Daimler has its books open. PACCAR, Kenworth, and Peterbilt are taking orders. Navistar will build. They have a new plant coming in San Antonio next year. The first vehicle there will be their medium duty electric truck. So the demand is high, mostly from a I want to check this out perspective. They're not ordering thousands of these trucks at this point, but they're ordering fives and tens to see if this is something that's really going to work. One of the things that John O'Leary pointed out yesterday that's really important is that there you have that classic chicken and egg. You've got I can give you the truck, but I don't have anywhere for you to charge it. And that's a problem, right? I mean, you're gonna on the medium duty side, it's easier because you can, put your charger behind the fence and return to base at night, and you've got a pretty stable opportunity where to charge. But if you're a Class 8 truck and you're running long haul and that sort of thing, you're going to need some efficient, high wattage charging along the way, and that is not there yet. So we've got an infrastructure question, that's got to be answered for these things. But I think the best numbers I've seen, and these again, interestingly enough, come from Daimler, from O'Leary's predecessor, Roger Nielsen. He said he sees medium duties at maybe 30% of the market electric by 2030, and maybe half as much, so 15% of Class 8 being electric by that time. That's a pretty fast ramp if you think about it, to get those trucks built and out there, and again, have the infrastructure. Every one of these manufacturers has some kind of I guess you call it charging as a service, where they'll help get the chargers in, and they even sell you the charger, and that kind of thing. So they see revenue, I think, all along the spectrum there. I think the idea though is going to be that to get to a critical mass of electric, we're a ways off.
So one of the things that we're seeing right now, of course, is a capacity crunch across the board. Zach, one of the things you mentioned was how people are potentially getting more efficient. And so, Alan, I'm wondering if you're hearing anything or seeing anything on your end about, a lot of these carriers have to do with what they have right now. Are you hearing anything about new types of efficiencies or even kind of implications or changes to dealing with some of this shortage right now?
Yeah, I love this story. I wrote it last week and had an opportunity to ride one of these trucks. It's one example, Anthony, but it's the idea of replacing outside mirrors with video cameras. That is having sort of a 12-inch or 15-inch array of video on your A pillar in the truck. Actually, on both sides, on both of the A pillars, removing the mirror from the outside and letting the camera do the work, and basically not the forward camera, but everything else around the truck. So say 270 degrees instead of a 360 view. There's safety implications to this, certainly, but there's also tremendous fuel savings from this particular technology. And again, you're getting some fleets now that are getting all in on it. You cannot, because the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has not approved these for OEM installation yet, but the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will allow. There's 3 companies that have an exemption, 5-year exemption, allowing them to be done as retrofits. So, truck comes out of the factory, it's got its mirrors on, but Daimler, here they go again, are doing pre-wiring for this particular technology, so they can, in fact, take it to an installer take those mirrors off, put caps on them, and then have those cameras in there. That is potentially 1 mile savings per gallon, and if you do the math on that,
that's huge.
A lot of money per year, right? So this is getting a lot of interest. Maverick Transportation, I think, has picked up on it in terms of going across the fleet. Tyson is looking at it, and so you've got some big fleets that are starting to buy into it. Company out here where I am in Michigan, up the road from me, called Stone Ridge. They do a lot of different hardware activity, including ELDs and so forth. But they are a leader in this mirror space. Another company out of Germany has got these as standard equipment on the Mercedes-Benz Actros, which is the Freightliner Cascadia, basically same truck, and they're standard over there, more for a fuel economy than a safety impact over there. So they're coming, and it's something that I think you will see. NHTSA, they started. Our colleague John Gallagher wrote last week that NHTSA is now talking to drivers about testing these out and that sort of thing. That tells me they're getting closer to making regulation that will allow them. And again, the fleets like them. They tested them early. They really like that technology. Of course, you're talking aerodynamics, right? You pull those. They're required to be 50 inches, but they can be up to 200 square inch mirrors off the truck. All of a sudden, the air is flowing around that truck a whole lot better, right? And so your aerodynamic gains are huge. And so that's one. And then our friends over, Mike Roth over at the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, they do these run on less programs where they're testing trucks to see, what can you do. They did a regional one. They've done a long haul where they get fleets to sort of, they're not hypermiling necessarily, but they're checking different technologies to see what really makes a difference. And of course, your skirts and your closures and things like that all help. Interesting though, we're back to electric. They are doing their run on less as electric this year. So they're doing workshops right now leading to the actual run on less program in September, where they'll basically have pretty much everybody who's got an entry in that electric vehicle space and trucking is going to be participating.
So I kind of want to divert a little bit because you mentioned something about, the auto manufacturers up there. And, a lot of the people, obviously, that watch our show, they have an interest in the automotive freight and the automotive industry. Can you draw any parallels or connection between what you're seeing in the OEM space and just the passenger vehicle space? Are they seeing the same types of, disruptions, challenges? I know that there's been plenty of plants that are operating on shortened schedules because they can't get semiconductors, et cetera. Are we seeing any easing in that, or is it similar to the trucking space for the Class 8s?
Well, trucking accounts for about 1%, Zach, of all the semiconductor use, okay? And I think the auto industry, if I'm not mistaken, is about 10%. The history on that, as you probably know, was that a lot of the car companies canceled their orders during the pandemic. And semiconductors or chips are a long lead item. They're 8, 10, 12 weeks to get them. So the supply that the auto industry gave up on got diverted to other things like to Nintendo and to, Switch and the Switch. But anyway, everybody got chips except the auto companies. I think that and I don't follow it closely, so I want to be a little careful how much I say, but we know that Ford got hit very heavily by this. They predicted that they could lose half of their production in the second quarter because of the semiconductors. For some reason, GM, where I used to work, hasn't had quite the same problem. I don't know if it's a sourcing issue or how they've done it, but they haven't felt quite the impact of that. I knew that I was coming on today, so I took a look a little bit yesterday at what was happening with monthly sales. There's not that many companies that report monthly anymore, but the Asian companies reported really, really strong sales for May, which means they have inventory and they were probably eating through it. It's really hard to say. I mean, obviously, some of these commodity issues are going to affect the car companies as well as trucking. Avery Weiss from FTR a little while ago today, and he was saying that if you took auto production out of the mix, in terms of the impact that it's having, you really wouldn't see quite as much of a disruption either in the supply chain or in inventories or any of it. So I think it's a really, really big part of this, but I don't anymore cover cars as much. So I'm just not is able to help you there.
So, Alan, one of the big things I'm always wondering about is the long term, or what this is all gonna look like months from down the line. I think maybe that's the economist mind in me of like always want to kind of forecast 3 to 6 months from now, or even a year from now. But as you mentioned, this is there's an extended fulfillment cycle on a lot of these new orders coming in. When we're, maybe looking at 6 to maybe even 12 months from now, do you think we're going to be a little too late? There's going to be maybe an oversupply of trucks, or do you think it's still going to be something that we're going to really have that demand for as these fleets start to come back online?
Well, I think a couple things there, and this will feed into your economics background, is depending what we see with inflation, I think you could see some orders get canceled. There's really no penalty on the truck manufacturer, excuse me, on the fleets if they place an order and then cancel it. They don't pay a penalty for that. So, you might see some cancellations if pricing goes crazy. Right now, all the indicators look like really strong 2022, really strong, probably peak 2023, and then start to trend downward after that in terms of where we are with both production and ultimately deliveries. It does feel like you have a lot more going on. I mean, we saw it certainly on the consumer side during the height of the pandemic, and that was home delivery and things like that. You've got these hybrid models of people working a little bit in the office and at home. I mean, look at what we're doing. Of course, I don't come down there anyway, maybe once, but I haven't been in the shop for a long time. But I will tell you that, for those who work at home, there's still going to be a great demand. And, I think that does affect maybe not as much the Class 8 because you've got, your Class 4 and 5 vehicles are going to continue to be in demand, maybe more in demand than the long haul trucking. But you're still going to need the trucking, right? And this all ties into what's happening with all these ships sitting out in the ports that aren't getting in and things like that. So everything seems to be backed up. We're going to stretch this out, is my point, Anthony. I think there's a stretched out cycle, not just in terms of producing trucks, but in terms of the cycle itself. I mean, this is a very, peak and trough kind of business, but it looks like the peak may extend this time a little longer than we usually see.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what you're finding.
I think you're spot on, Alan. I think it's similar across the board. Now, I want to pull up this one chart. This is the van outbound tender rejection index with the flatbed outbound tender rejection index. So this is essentially two different sections of the economy being measured here. You've got the industrial, construction, heavy flatbed sector, along with your retail, consumer product, just about general commodity sector in the van tender rejection rate there in yellow. And the blue one is, of course, flatbed. And we see a huge divergence in these two sectors. Anthony, of course, has talked about this a lot. And, the flatbed tender rejection index is just getting going this year. Do you think this is indicative, Alan, of, what you've seen in kind of the manufacturing space? Does this line up with what you've seen, over there on the OEM side?
Yeah, I think to an extent it does. I always struggle a little bit to get my bearings on these charts, but I'll tell you what we're seeing with flatbed is it trailed dry and reefer vans dramatically, and for the last 4 or 5 months, it's been coming back nicely, starting to tail off again a little bit. I think it could come back if we get anything meaningful in infrastructure, right? I mean, because they
Right.
hauling the kind of stuff that they have to tie down is going to become important again. But flatbed has made a nice recovery in recent months, so you could potentially see some rejections, as it looks like this chart showing. Dry and reefer have peaked really late last year in the pandemic and have continued to be strong. It's interesting that right now on the trailer side, you can't even get a build slot for anything. I was just down in Savannah last week on a trip with my wife, but I took time to go over to Great Dane, which is based there, and talking to Chris Hammond, who is he's the head of sales for them, and he said, we can't open 2022 yet because we don't have enough visibility on commodity pricing. He said, but I don't have anything left for 21. He said, I can't build anything. Maybe a few flatbeds in the fourth quarter is about all he can do. So it looks like everything's very tight across the way, and I guess that would ultimately feed into a tender rejection.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about the trailers. I meant to bring up a chart of the trailer orders that we have, to talk about that a little bit. We got so into the Class 8 side of things, but, maybe the next time we'll get into the trailer side of things. But that's, are you seeing, real quickly, the same exact problem on the trailer side that you do on the van or the Class 8s?
Yeah. Yes, I mean the build time is a little shorter. The time to production to delivery is a little shorter, but yeah, they're maxed out. There's not much they can do at this point, except try to negotiate or navigate between commodity pricing and availability is okay if you're willing to pay for it, but you've got to have the money to pay for it, and they're all pretty maxed out. I try to make sure that in our stories on trailers that we don't just use the numbers. I think that's a partial ball score. So we try to get to some of these guys who make them and talk to them about what's going on in their shops. And we've had some good success with that. And Chris Hammond being one of those people. And then Sean Kenny out at Hyundai Translate is another really helpful source on this stuff. I mean, he's very, very candid about what they go through.
Right. So, Alan, I'm told that you're ready to debate. Normally we'd send our guest on their way, but if you're wanting to jump in on the fun here to debate, I'll let you stay for a minute while we close down
I'll
the show.
stay, but what's our subject, brother? What are we going to talk about?
The best I know I'm dead moment in a movie. So basically, either by choice or by walking in unwittingly, they realize it's over. Now, I've got a few. I'll make it a little bit easier. So I'll give you a list. Of these. So I'm going to let you and Anthony duke it out, and then I'll chime in and beat both of you. But
I've seen what you've done with Craig, by the way, Zach. You've taken him to school more than once.
Right. Yeah, I won, but I lost.
We're still here, so you didn't lose that badly.
Proof. So the first one here is Jurassic Park, when the guy's shooting the gun and he sees that he's been snuck up on by the raptor and goes, "Clever girl." He knows he's about to die. The next one, Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense, and sorry for spoilers, when he realizes that he's dead. Terminator 2 would be the next one. You get the big thumbs up there at the end when he puts himself into the lava. Iron Man, for those of you that are fans of the Avengers, again, sorry for the spoiler alert there, but it's been a few years. You can deal with that. As he kills Thanos. Randy Quaid in Independence Day as he flies into the spaceship. And the last one, Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Disappointing movie, but he knew he was dead. Obviously, he's a classic character. Which one of those do you feel?
Yeah, my problem, Zach, is I've seen 2 of the 4. Or 2 of the 6 that you named. That's my problem. But I will tell you that... Yeah, okay. I will tell you that the death of Iron Man in, I am a Marvel guy. I love Marvel stuff. Love the Marvel universe. I will tell you that not only was that a shocker, but it was like, really? They killed off Iron Man? How'd they do that? But, so yeah, that would be my pick.
All right.
I have to go.
Thanos, if I'm going off badass.
Yeah, Thanos was dope. Jurassic Park, the clever girl one, okay. I love because in a sense, it's like, he's taking it as a game, like, well played. Well played. I accept this. Like, you did good. And I think that's one of those true sick hunter mentalities. Like, I'm in it truly for the game. And that was like a game that he obviously lost. And
yeah, you're wrong. But, I actually will agree with Alan a lot more there because Iron Man, obviously, you go through all that series of movies. And then at the very end, I mean, honestly, I thought it was pretty epic the way that they did it leading into that because he obviously kind of kickstarted that whole, return to the franchise. The Marvel world was based on Iron Man's success. And so Disney decided, hey, we had that to go. So I'm good with that one, but I'm going to diverge from both of you and say, I'm sorry, but if you don't remember what it was like to watch The Sixth Sense and see Bruce Willis realize, his wife's ring, or his ring, I guess, actually drops out of her hand, bounces next to the closet. And you go the whole movie thinking that this dude has just had a broken life. His marriage is in a shamble. This kid he's been trying to help consistently, and he realizes, wait, the only reason this kid's talking to me is because he can actually see dead people, and I'm one of them. I don't know about y'all, but the feeling I got was, and that was one of the movies you haven't seen. So sorry about that, Alan. But
I remember the trailer,
okay.
Zach. I do. I wonder why you didn't mention The Departed, though.
Which person? There's so much.
The Departed?
Yeah, no, I know the movie is one of the best of all time.
The dead mob guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole movie is about dead mob guys. But anyway, given time to think about it, I could probably come up with a couple myself. But because I really love the movies, but I'm a big Marvel Universe guy. I love it. Not as much as one of my sons does. He actually has a Love You 3000 shirt, which is of course what Tony Stark told his daughter, right? Late in the movie. Yeah.
I gotta go with an I Am
I wondered
Legend
what that was.
well.
Now you're starting to pull the emotions.
I Am Legend at that end.
Oh yeah,
because there's two endings, of course. But
you're driving me nuts. You're killing me. Now I'm gonna go home sad.
Go home sad and rewatch the ending. Look it up on YouTube. But I think that's another one.
Anthony, we have to let him win, right? I mean, we got to let him win or he won't come back.
Yeah, there's that. And then we have Cody Mathis, who also mentioned the Titanic. So, I mean, that's another one for consideration.
All right.
He didn't have to die. Save Jack.
Yeah, enough fun for the week before Anthony takes me down the feelings route again. Too far. So, Alan, thank you so much for joining our show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you,
very
of course.
Much, guys.
Yeah, thank you for what they can check you out on FreightWaves.com, obviously, and of course on a lot of our other shows.
Let me get a quick plug in for Truck Talk, which is our newsletter.
Please.
It's not as new as it was. It's about 4 months old now, and we're building an audience over there. What we do with Truck Talk on Fridays is, by email if you subscribe, and of course it's on the site as well. We're trying to provide some perspective and context for some of the things that go on. There are a lot of things that we hear about every week that in and of themselves maybe don't warrant a full story or full treatment. But when enough of them happen, and a little preview for tomorrow, when you get enough things where people are telling you about things they've done, whether it's hauling watermelons autonomously or it's testing hybrid electrics up in the Northwest or whatever, when you pull those together and you can put a little perspective with it in terms of what does this mean? We're trying to do that with the newsletter as much as we can. And so far people seem to like it. So, Truck Talk on Fridays.
That's awesome. No, thanks for that. I learned something now too. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Well, go subscribe. Well, yeah, I'll take the number.
No, I'm definitely subscribing. If I can figure out how that computer thing works.
Yeah, I know. There is that.
Well, thank you again, Alan.
Thanks
Have
again.
a great day. Thanks for tuning in as well to our audience, Anthony Smith.
That's it. And we also had Dooner late chime in for the guy in the bathroom in Jurassic Park as well. I don't know. I got to rewatch all these movies now, so I got to go down this whole movie lane. But thank you all for tuning in for this episode of Freightonomics. We'll be back again next week.
Same bat time, same bat channel. I'm not taking a vacation next week.